See now, Elle, you
Professional development series. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We have a few folks still joining us, so in about 1 or 2 minutes, we're going to get started. But we are so excited you are here to join us today. So stay tuned.
Our career. Those people that did come on time on a Friday afternoon. And if Elle gives me the thumbs up, we will get underway and I will go ahead and give you guys a little insight about this phenomenal woman. Elle Cole is a passionate educator and speaker who serves as a parent, health advocate for sickle cell disease and type 1 diabetes. She is a recipient of a Bronze Congressional Award, and she authored a sickle cell coloring book for kids, which is an A to Z guide for growing up with sickle cell disease. In 2019, she created and produced the Cleverly Changing podcast to support and empower diverse families who want to homeschool. She empowers mothers, homeschoolers, and advocates for children with special needs. She likes macaroni and cheese and pears. And with no further ado, I want to turn this over to Elle Cole.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. So it is an honor to be here today and share a little bit about our life as homeschoolers with educators. And I started as an educator many years ago when I finished college and I was teaching children in school. But when I became a mother, I learned that my child had chronic illness. And so she has a genetic disorder and also an autoimmune disease. So I had to leave my corporate job and I chose to be a stay-at-home mom. And when my children became school age, I decided it was time for me to teach them. And, you know, ironically, when we went to a pediatrician's appointment, our pediatrician actually recommended that I homeschool my twin girls who are now 12. So they have always been homeschooled. And so what I'm going to share with you today is how we disconnect to reconnect using old school learning to captivate their young minds in this digital age. So I really want to get into this topic. And we all know that right now, kids all over the country are being inundated with screen time. It's estimated that roughly 35% of preschoolers in the study, which was done by AAP News, they had their own device. And that's very young to have their own devices. And they used it for an average of nearly 2 hours a day. As a parent and watching my kids grow, and as an educator, I know that there can be some speech delays that occur when kids are so heavily using devices. And so it's important for us to really take time and engage children, talk to them, touch them, and utilize the 5 different senses when we're interacting with them. And that's something that digital devices can't quite do. The American Academy of Pediatric guidelines are clear. Avoid digital use except video chatting in children younger than 18 to 24 months. When children are very young, they really need that personal contact. As humans, we are all relational beings. And so we have to learn how to engage one another so that we are using eye contact. Often when we use our language, we're using symbols and different things and gestures. All of that really helps a child learn language. And so when they're using a digital device, they're not getting those key components that they need in order to interact and communicate effectively. For children who are 2 to 5 years old, they need to limit non-educational screen time to 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on the weekend. So when my kids were young, we often would go and take walks, and it was incredible because I could teach them their colors by pointing out the grass, pointing at the blue sky, pointing at signs we would see. And really, we can take in the world as educators and begin to really use things that are in people's everyday lives to teach our students. And so it's helpful to really help look at the world around us and incorporate that as we teach our children. So too much screen time, we all know this, it can cause some issues like weight gain, mood swings, insecurity, insomnia, stress, poor grades, headaches, poor posture, lack of self-control, and overstimulation. This isn't just for students, it's also things that we as adults face when we're spending too much time on devices. Now, we know that we're living in a technology age, so technology is here to stay, but really, how can we incorporate more non-screen time in our daily activities and in the assignments that we give to our students in our classes? I think the best way for us to do that is to set healthy screen time habits. So our parents may be looking at us to really help establish what those guidelines should be. And we have to model healthy screen time behaviors. So when we're setting screen time habits, we have to create a screen time plan. And as educators, we can actually encourage families to create a plan and say, your child can use a device for, provide suggestions for maybe, 2 to 3 hours. But we also want to be able to help them engage. So if they're watching TV as a family or movies, we want to provide suggestions like talk to your kids about what they're watching. Come up with some questions, see if they notice some of the things that you've pointed out, and really not just take opportunities to consume media, but also engage with it and create dialogue around it so that it's more of an exchange. You want to encourage parents to implement parental control features. So right now, many of the cable companies and the internet companies also have an app that goes along with their service. So families can implement parental controls and control what type of information and ads and things their children are allowed to see, which is very helpful. You can also control the Wi-Fi. I know this is one of the methods that we use in our home to control, how much screen time, to set kind of parameters and boundaries around nighttime screen time, dinner time screen time, because when we're eating and doing other things, we don't also want to distract ourselves by, having a phone in our hand. And what happens is if our kids see us, sitting at the table at dinner time, and we are only looking at our devices and not looking at them and finding out how their day is going, even if our kids are remote learning and they're with us most of the time, we still need to engage in that sort of dialogue and talk to them about what is going on in their lives. So the next thing we have to do is monitor screen time content. Unfortunately, with the pandemic that's happening, so many kids are using screen time as babysitters. And that's really not what it's designed to do. There are definitely, like we all know, are some really incredible apps and some incredible programs and software that can really help kids grow and really stimulate their minds. But if they're doing that all the time, there's some other portions like imagination that they may not be tapping into. So we want to set boundaries around that. The next thing we want to do is model healthy screen time behaviors. So I mentioned that a little bit earlier because as educators, our class, they are watching us. As parents, our children are watching us. How are we communicating with our coworkers? How are we, what is our email etiquette? So a lot of times there are some things that we may not notice that our kids are picking up about the way that we communicate and go back and forth, but they are watching those nonverbal cues as well. And so we have to learn how to set and model positive screen time behaviors. There is a media time calculator on healthychildren.org that is incredible. So if a parent doesn't know how to create a media plan, this is really a guide that can help them really get started with that plan. What's cool about it is you can type in your family name and personalize it. And there are just lots of helpful tips. You can type in the child's name and you can type in their age, and it'll show actual guidelines and parameters. It even has a spot for chores and bedtime and things like that that parents can incorporate if they need a guideline on healthy habits and how to really set a media plan. So we know that there are issues around screen time, but what are the solutions? We really want to tap into solutions that families and that our students can really engage with and really take on and utilize and mold and make it their own. So some of those solutions that I want to share with you today are: first, encourage more verbal dialogue. We have to talk to each other. That's a part of our humanity. The second thing I want to talk about is assign more hands-on projects. You know, we think about the yesteryears and the time of like Albert Einstein and how people were going out and using astronomy and looking at the stars, and they were inventing and creating and doing things with their hands. We possess amazing minds and we're able to still invent and create, but sometimes our students need prompting and they need to be pushed in that direction. And we can do that by assigning more hands-on projects. The third thing that we can do is become more physically active. So if we are teaching remotely, we need to implement times of stretching, maybe sometimes when we meditate and quiet down, some calming times. And, you know, we want to get kids and let them wiggle. Wiggles are good, especially those younger kids who are very active. They cannot just, it's almost absurd to think that they can sit there for hours on end and just listen and look at a screen and go back and forth. So we really need to encourage healthy physical active behaviors. So let's unpack what I mean by encouraging more dialogue. So as educators, we have to ask questions. So when we have timid children in our classes who don't turn their screens on, we have to ask them questions directly and see how they're doing. It may even involve, you know, putting them in a special group outside of the other kids and having you know, someone who is engaged in social emotional learning that's asking them probing questions about, you know, what's going on. We have to really talk to kids about what they're feeling and how they're navigating, because we're just dealing with a time where kids are experiencing different emotions and things that they've never experienced before. And so there are some fears and sometimes anxiety that may come into play. And so when we are observant and we're watching what's going on with our class and we're looking at what type of things are abnormal that are taking place, and really honing in and trying to find out what is the cause of that and trying to get an understanding. It's really a time for us to emotionally connect with our students and understand them on other levels outside of just what work they've done and, you know, what they're turning in. So here are a few ways that we can encourage kids to unplug. So we can encourage families to cook and bake together. We can encourage them to make music together. Even as a class, we can tap into their musical sides by, you know, using different things in the class. You don't actually have to have instruments. You can create instruments. Let's say you take an Easter egg, like a plastic Easter egg, and you put rice in it or beans. You can shake that and come up with different, you know, rhythms You can take the desk or a book and it can become a drum. You just really want to tap into that creativity and get kids to kind of explore outside of just looking at a screen and tapping into other things. And some kids, they may not be so great at the academics, but some of them may be really skilled musicians. And so we want to celebrate that within our students. The next thing we want to do is teach each other your hobbies. So that could be students in our class who are gifted at certain things. Maybe they're gifted artists, or maybe they're gifted, musicians that we just talked about. They can share that with the class, even, encouraging them to share their hobbies with their parents, because often we find that parents sometimes are way too busy to tap into their hobbies like they used to. But if we can encourage them to, share with their children, that will build and create deeper relationships that can sometimes be very positive. They just need a bit of a nudge. The next thing that we can do, we can play board games. We can even encourage families to put a model car together or just create things together. In the pictures, I have my children who created different buildings from recycled materials that we have around the house. Right now, many families are facing economic concerns. And so they don't have a lot of money to buy a lot of stuff for STEM, but really STEM and STEAM things, you can use recycled items that are found within your home. And if they are able to get things and, whatever we can provide and encourage, the second photo shows an electric circuit kit where the kids are putting it together. And so we want to encourage that sort of innovation and invention within our classes. Another thing that we can do is create stories, a song or poetry. And, I think poetry is kind of so musical, and you never know. You may have a kid in your class who can't sing, who may not like reading out loud, but they may love the sound of poetry, and that may be where that child comes alive. And so you really want to tap into those sort of experiences to really get to know all kids where they are. The next thing that you can encourage as a class or as a family is icebreakers. And, if you're remote learning, many schools are actually going back into the classroom. And so we will have to start implementing more icebreakers to really help everybody feel at ease and encouraged. Some of those icebreakers could be like a bingo game. If you're encouraging your students to do games and activities as a family reunion bingo game would be awesome, so that they learn who is in the family and how different people are connected. Charades has always been a winner, a talent show, because everybody possesses a skill or talent that is unique. So here are some things that my family and we enjoy doing. So we enjoy keyboarding and fishing and going to the library and reading books. I cannot stress enough how important reading is. If you have reluctant readers, I know we always encourage our reluctant readers to read things that are related to their interests. And there are tons and tons of books. There are even now book clubs that will introduce students to readers and authors who look like them, which is so important. There isn't a set model of who an author is, and our children need to know that. So we need to give kids that understanding that they too can become an author even while they're children. One of the things I wanted to share with you today is that I encourage you to have students, regardless of the age, even adults can do this, create a calming jar. Because right now with the pandemic, many of us are facing anxiety, and a calming jar serves as a relaxation tool to help reduce anxiety and fear. And we are all facing the uncertainty of the future. And so one of the ways that we can kind of learn how to calm down and sit still. I like to say that, taking a deep breath can really help relax us. So taking 10 deep breaths can do that. But a calming jar is something that is tangible. And sometimes our students need a tangible reminder. Even sometimes we need that reminder. And a calming jar is something easy that students can create. They can create it either in a classroom or at home. All they need is an empty water bottle, warm water, glitter paint or food coloring, sequins, beads. Really, they could use pebbles. It's things around the house. All of those things can go into creating a calming jar that can really help reduce those fears. So if you have a student that is remote learning and they're antsy and you're trying to really calm them, encouraging them to create a calming jar can be the solution that they may need. So I mentioned assign hands-on projects. I believe our children today are just as, if not more brilliant than the people that we read about in history books who were doing the inventing and creating. We just have to give them an opportunity to do that. So if you have younger children in your class, sensory bins are amazing. Busy bags, book reading. We talked about the power of book reading and having kids see that authors look exactly like them and they are people that they can connect with and relate to. The next thing is photography. Our kids possess all different types of gifts. So maybe assigning projects that may encourage photography. So many families, not all, but many families will have a cell phone, and our cell phones have the ability now to take some incredible pictures. So maybe you assign something like a scavenger hunt, with simple items that they can see in their neighborhood, and you're encouraging them to think outside the box and look outside the box and utilize photography. Drawing. Some of our kids are visual learners. So when you see them doodling on the paper, that is something that may be something they need to encourage. That may be how their brain remembers. So take opportunities to encourage art and drawing and painting and imaginary play and creating things with recycled supplies. So in the photo, the first photo shows kids creating, it's my kids who are creating a part of the brain, the different neurons, and they're putting the pieces together and they're using just simple things like pipe cleaners and cotton balls and just a variety of things. So see common household items or common items that you have in your classroom that you can incorporate to get the kids to create a 3D model that they can understand a little deeper. Because a lot of kids need something to hold in order for them to remember. We like to say repetition deepens the impression, but when our students are using more senses, and especially for those students who are tactile learners, you want to let them create something. So when you have opportunities to put information together so that they can create things, allow them to do that. And the bottom photo shows a really simple sensory bin that families can create. Even you can create it in your classroom with regular household items. Doesn't cost a lot to do it. So I wanted to share just a really simple way on how you can create a simple sensory bin. And I know this is really geared towards younger students, but if you have students who are, even as far as middle school, who are facing anxiety and things like that, you can come up with some creative ways to make this more complex so that it's not just for preschoolers. But sensory bins promote hands-on learning, movement, imagination, and exploration using a child's 5 senses. All you need is a shoebox plastic bin. You can create a base using rice, sand, water, noodles, cotton balls. Really, the options are endless. You want to have a tool, a measuring cup, a shovel. You can even use tweezers if you're dealing with older children. But you can use fun items, toys, coins, Legos, bricks. This just really gets the mind exploring. And so it can be as complex as you want it for older kids or as simple as you need it to be for preschoolers. So the third thing that I mentioned that we need to start doing more is becoming more physically active. And so how do we do that? We can encourage our students to take a walk. When our kids are back in the classroom, we can take a walk and really give them opportunities to look out and see what they observe. We can encourage them to go hiking with their families, bird watching. One of my daughters, she is an avid bird watcher. She has a bird book and she loves looking at the birds that are found on the East Coast. So we want to give our kids to an opportunity to explore their interests. So if you have a student in your class that's interested in bird watching, encourage that and let them know that they can check out books, they can learn more about the different parts of birds. And really, you can center so many assignments around whatever their interests are. And sometimes kids don't know they're interested in that until you assign that sort of assignment. The next thing, flying kites. So that should say flying kites. And you can use a fly kit to create kites that kids can use. In this picture here, we have kids flying kites. And that's one of my children's favorite activities. Visit a local state park or national park. I know right now field trips are almost non-existent because of the pandemic, but it does give us an opportunity to encourage families to do those activities together and take road trips if they can to really engage and get outdoors and try something that maybe they hadn't necessarily been exposed to before. Yoga is something that they can do within their homes or within the classroom, and even that meditation to really just quiet them down and calm them. That can help. Practice indoor aerobics is another thing. So these are just some outdoor activities because we do need to get outdoors as much as possible. So one of the key takeaways that I wanted to share today is children take their cues from the adults around them. So while everything will certainly not always be easy, parents can exemplify how to react during these adverse times. So not just parents, we as educators really set the tone for our classes in the way that we react to things. So like when we go back to school and we find out if one of the students has COVID, how we react to that and how we move forward. We really set the tone so that our kids won't be fearful and so that they'll know what type of precautions they need to take. And so that's just very important for us to remember. And next, as many schools across the country are preparing to reopen, parents and educators will have to work together and trust each other to provide what's best for our students. So we have to take one day at a time. And that's what we have to remember, that it's not just us doing all the work to educate the students. We have to work alongside the parents, and we have to encourage different activities and encourage participation among the parents so that they're reinforcing lessons that we're teaching in our classrooms. Any questions? I see there may be one question in the chat, and I'm going to take a look and see if we can do that. But while I'm doing that, this is pretty much where I'm found online. I'm the host of the Cleverly Changing podcast, which is a podcast. It's a home education podcast, not just for homeschoolers, but also parents who want to supplement their child's education. And often we have educators and psychologists and other people on to really share resources that they've created for diverse and multicultural families. So I am opening the chat to see if we have any questions. And I don't see questions. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. Thank you. I see we have a comment and it says, thank you. This was very informational. So thank you for listening and for watching. I appreciate your comment. So I cannot hear you, Dennis. I think
There you go now. You hear me now. We
Yes.
appreciate having you here today, Elle. And, you know, truly,
There is one. Sorry, Dennis, there is
it's
one.
all good. What
Says
tips
what?
would you give parents who are sure how to advocate for their children? I guess
who are not sure.
yeah, I was gonna say we're missing a word there. Yep.
Okay, so one of the things I would say is you have to listen. I think the very first thing you need to do is observe those who, observe the teacher, how they interact with your child, and then observe your child. Does your child need to have a deeper understanding? Do they need more education around a certain area? You really want to take that into account. And if it depends on what type of advocacy you need, because you can advocate on, Capitol Hill and get laws changed and laws passed, especially, right now, this is Rare Disease Week. So a lot of people aren't necessarily physically there because of the pandemic, but they found other ways to connect and advocate with nonprofits. Partnering with a nonprofit is a great way, especially if your child has, like we think about autism or we think about ADHD. There are terrific nonprofits who need more participation. And so look for the nonprofit in your area if you want to get into advocacy and start advocating for your child. But, it really starts within the home, speaking up, letting your child know that they're seen, they're heard, and you care about what matters to them. So those are just some basic ways that you can advocate for children. You're welcome, you're welcome. So if you are an educator, you definitely can advocate for students in your classroom by teaching other students about the differences that exist and really making sure that you make all kids feel comfortable and special and unique and educating them. I think, we know that different illnesses are different gifts and skills. All kids have differences. And so instead of isolating those differences, really taking time to find ways to celebrate them and just making kids aware, because as they grow and they become adults, they'll interact with other adults who have, challenges. And so it's while they're young that they learn how to react with other adults who may have challenges.
And now, while you still have the floor, can we do a quick plug, or can you do a quick plug of when and where they can check out your podcast?
Sure. So my podcast is a bi-weekly podcast, and it's really on most podcast platforms. So almost everywhere that podcasts are played, we are on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, pretty much almost everywhere. So even, there's tons, SoundCloud, like tons of apps that play podcasts, but you can listen. I would love for you to listen, leave a review, share it with a friend. I have some really amazing episodes that are coming out. One new episode came out today, and our guest was an educator who had been in the classroom for 37 years, who just retired, and she wrote a book about her experiences. It's called Don't Poo in the Pudding Bowl. So if you can imagine by that title, the interview was incredible and it was hilarious. So definitely check out, this was episode 51. It is truly hilarious. And I know that if you are an educator, you've had some incredible and fascinating moments in your classroom. And so just imagine being in the class for 37 years. You can only just begin to imagine the stories that she could tell and share.
Thank you, Elle, and I will be sure to check that out, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. I want to thank everyone for spending this afternoon with us and learning from Elle, Cole, and also I want to give a shout out to Karee once again for putting this all together for us, and also Kevin with the AIU3, Grable Foundation for their support, Manchester Academic Charter School, Urban Academy, and the Urban Foundation, and the Urban Reach Foundation. We do look forward to you guys continuing to join us for our additional series. And again, this whole community that we have focusing on the state of Black learning and focusing on Black children. This is something very special that we have. And actually, if you have not already received word, Karee, can you do a quick plug about the opportunity for educators that we have out there right now? I don't think she can right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and make that plug myself. Right now, we do have the opportunity for educators to be presenters. If you have not received that information, we will make sure that's blasted out to the network, but we are taking applications right now, and there is a compensation that we are awarding to educators that do present. So please, by all means, showcase you're doing phenomenal work during some very challenging times. So we do want to highlight the phenomenal work that you are all doing. So again, we thank you all for joining us this evening, and we do look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you. We will end the webinar at the count of 3, 2, 1.